Do you think you're unlucky? Honestly, have you ever looked at other people and thought they were simply born better than you? That they had better opportunities, better circumstances, that somehow life favors them while it ignores you? But stop for a second and face the truth. You are not unlucky. You are just lacking discipline. It's not that life is working against you. It's not that fate has turned its back on you. It's that every single day you are choosing the easiest path for yourself. You say you don't have opportunities, but you spend hours on things that don't matter. You say you're not good enough, but you refuse to practice when things start to get difficult. You say you can't compete with others, but you quit the moment you feel tired. And then you call all of that bad luck. But it's not. It's a choice. A choice repeated every day. The choice to avoid, the choice to delay, the choice to take comfort now instead of growth later. And those small choices are silently shaping your entire life. You are not failing because you lack talent. You are failing because you don't do what needs to be done long enough. There is a truth that very few people are willing to face. The person you call lucky is simply more disciplined than you. They don't have any magic. They have also been tired, frustrated, and close to quitting. But they kept going. They do the things you avoid. They wake up while you are still asleep. They work while you are waiting for motivation. They move forward while you are still looking for excuses. And while you wait for the day you finally feel ready, they have already gone much further than you. You only see their results in a moment, but you don't see the hundreds of days they worked in silence. You don't see the mornings they forced themselves to get up when their body wanted to stay in bed. You don't see the times they doubted themselves but refused to stop. You only see success and call it luck, but you don't see the price they paid. And meanwhile, you are paying a different price. The price of choosing what is easy. You choose to sleep a little longer, to delay one more day, to avoid one more time. And the price of easy is always a harder life later. You cannot choose comfort and expect results. You cannot avoid effort and expect progress. Life does not work that way. If you want to change, if you want to escape the feeling of being behind, if you want to become someone you can respect, then you must accept something most people don't want to hear. No one is coming to save you. There is no perfect time. There is no day when you suddenly feel full of motivation. Motivation is unstable. It comes and goes, and if you depend on it, you will remain stuck. What you need is not inspiration, but discipline. Discipline to do what is right, even when you don't like it. Discipline to keep going, even when you don't see results immediately. Discipline to act, even when you doubt yourself. And this is exactly where most people fail. They want change, but they don't want discomfort. They want success, but they don't accept repetition. They want fast results, but they don't have the patience for the long road. They quit not because they can't, but because they cannot endure the difficulty of the process. And then they return to where they started, telling themselves, maybe this isn't for me, maybe I'm just not lucky. But deep down, they know the truth. They know they didn't try hard enough, didn't persist long enough, weren't disciplined enough, and your life right now is the result of what you repeatedly do every day. Nothing more, nothing less. If you choose to delay every day, you will have a stagnant life. If you choose discipline every day, you will have a different life. Not instantly, but inevitably. And the real question is not whether you are lucky or not. The real question is whether you are strong enough to do what must be done, even when no one is forcing you, even when no one is watching, even when there is no immediate reward. Because the moment you start doing the right things in silence, that is the moment your life begins to change. Not because fate has changed, but because you finally have. You think it's luck, don't you? You look at someone else's life, their success, their progress, their results, and you tell yourself a quiet story that makes you feel better. They had better opportunities. They were born into the right situation. They just got lucky. And for a moment, that story protects you. It softens the weight of your own inaction. It gives you a reason to stay where you are without feeling completely responsible for it. But stop for a second and look deeper, because that belief, this idea of luck, is one of the most dangerous illusions you can hold on to. It doesn't just comfort you, it traps you. The truth is harsh, and most people will do anything to avoid it. You are not stuck because of bad luck, you are stuck because of repeated choices. Every time you say, I don't have opportunities, what you often mean is, I didn't take the small opportunities that were available to me. Every time you say, I wasn't born with the same advantages, what you're really saying is, I don't want to face how much consistent effort it actually takes to close that gap. It's easier to blame circumstances than to confront discipline. It's easier to point outward than to look inward. Human nature is wired this way. We protect our ego by shifting responsibility. We say, I didn't succeed because the timing wasn't right, instead of saying, I wasn't ready when the opportunity came. We say it had connections, instead of admitting, I didn't build any. We say, they're just lucky, instead of recognizing, they showed up every day while I didn't. And the more you repeat these excuses, the more real they start to feel, until one day you believe them completely. That's when the illusion becomes your reality. But here's the Stoic truth, stripped of comfort. Luck is not random in the way you think it is. What you call luck is often the visible result of invisible repetition. It is the outcome of actions taken consistently over time, long before anyone else was paying attention. It is preparation meeting the moment, but you only see the moment. You don't see the preparation. Think about the people you admire, the ones you secretly compare yourself to. You see their success at the surface level, the recognition, the results, the moment where everything seems to click for them. What you don't see are the hundreds of quiet decisions that came before that moment. The early mornings when they chose to wake up instead of staying in bed. The late nights when they kept working instead of distracting themselves. The days when nothing seemed to improve, but they showed up anyway. The times they failed, adjusted, and tried again without announcing it to the world. You don't see the repetition because repetition is not exciting. It's not dramatic. It doesn't get attention. It's slow, it's often boring, and it rarely feels rewarding in the moment. But it is exactly that repetition that creates what later looks like luck. When the opportunity finally appears, they are ready, not because they were chosen, but because they prepared. Meanwhile, most people live in the opposite pattern. They wait. They wait for motivation, for clarity, for the perfect moment. They tell themselves, I'll start when I feel ready. But readiness never comes. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, and nothing changes. And then, when they see someone else succeed, they feel a mix of frustration and disbelief. How did they get there so fast, they ask, ignoring the fact that what looks fast was actually built slowly, one disciplined action at a time. There is a brutal honesty in this. You are always preparing for something, whether you realize it or not. If you spend your days avoiding effort, you are preparing for a life of regret. If you spend your days choosing comfort, you are preparing for limitation. If you spend your days complaining instead of acting, you are preparing to stay exactly where you are. And then, when life presents an opportunity, you won't be ready, and you'll call it bad luck. But if you reverse that pattern, if you begin to act consistently, even when it's uncomfortable, you start building something different. You start building readiness. You start becoming the kind of person who can recognize and seize opportunities when they appear. And when that moment comes, others will look at you and say, you're lucky. They will not see the cost you paid. They will not see the discipline it required. They will only see the result. This is why the idea of luck is so misleading. It hides the process. It erases the effort. It compresses years of work into a single moment of success and labels it as chance. And if you believe that, you remove your own power. Because if everything is luck, then nothing is under your control. And if nothing is under your control, then why even try? But Stoic philosophy rejects that completely. It doesn't deny that circumstances exist or that some people start with advantages. It simply refuses to let those factors define the outcome. It places the focus where it belongs, on what you do, repeatedly, every single day. It asks a simple but uncomfortable question. What are you doing with what you have right now? Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter where you start as much as it matters how you move. Two people can begin in completely different places, but the one who acts consistently, who disciplines themselves, who refuses to quit when things become difficult, that person will close the gap over time. Not overnight, not instantly, but inevitably. And this is where most people fail to understand the timeline. They expect immediate results. They expect effort to pay off quickly. And when it doesn't, they stop. They assume it's not working. They assume they're not capable. They assume, once again, that they're just unlucky. But they don't realize that they stopped right before the results would have started to appear. They didn't give the process enough time. The lucky person, on the other hand, stays. They continue when it's inconvenient. They continue when it's frustrating. They continue when there is no visible progress. And because of that, they accumulate something that cannot be faked: momentum. Each action builds on the last. Each repetition strengthens their skill, their mindset, their resilience. And by the time others notice them, they are already far ahead. So when you look at someone and think, they're lucky, ask yourself a different question instead. What did they do that I didn't? Not in a superficial way, but in a deep, honest way. What habits did they build? What sacrifices did they make? What discomfort did they endure that you avoided? Because the answers to those questions are far more useful than the illusion of luck. You have to understand this clearly. Luck is not something you wait for. It is something you create through disciplined action. It is built in the small moments, the decisions no one sees, the effort no one praises, the consistency that feels invisible. And it compounds over time until one day it becomes undeniable. And when that day comes, people will look at you the same way you once looked at others. They will say you were fortunate. They will say things worked out for you. They will not see the years of preparation behind that moment. But you will know the truth. You will know that it was never luck. It was you showing up again and again, long before anyone else believed it mattered. Discipline is not exciting. It is not glamorous. It will not make you feel powerful in the moment, and it will never give you the instant rush that you secretly crave. In fact, if you're being honest with yourself, discipline often feels like the exact opposite of everything you want. It feels slow, it feels repetitive, it feels uncomfortable. And that is precisely why most people never develop it. Let's be clear from the beginning. Discipline is not cool. It doesn't look impressive from the outside. There are no dramatic moments, no sudden breakthroughs that make people stop and admire you. Discipline is waking up when you don't want to. It's doing the same task again and again when your mind is begging for something new. It's staying focused while everything around you is designed to distract you. It's choosing long-term results over short-term comfort every single time. And that's the part people avoid, because discipline doesn't give you dopamine. It doesn't reward you instantly. You don't feel accomplished after one day. You don't feel transformed after 1 week. Sometimes you don't feel anything at all. And in a world where everything is built to give you quick satisfaction, scrolling, entertainment, instant feedback, discipline feels like punishment. So people escape it. They choose what feels good now instead of what builds something later. They choose comfort, distraction, and ease. They tell themselves they'll start tomorrow or next week or when they feel more motivated. But tomorrow never comes in the way they expect. Motivation fades, and they stay exactly where they are. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The reason you're not where you want to be is not because you don't have enough talent. It's not because you're not smart enough. It's not because you lack potential. It's because you haven't stayed disciplined long enough. You didn't fail because you couldn't do it. You failed because you stopped too early. That's it. Discipline is repetition, and repetition is boring. It's doing the same thing when there's no excitement left. It's practicing when there's no visible improvement. It's continuing when the initial energy is gone. And that's where almost everyone quits. Think about it. In the beginning, everything feels new. You feel motivated. You feel driven. You tell yourself, this time is different. You start strong. You put in effort. You see a little progress. And then slowly the excitement fades. The results slow down. The work becomes routine. And suddenly it feels heavy. That's the moment that decides everything. Because in that moment, you have two choices. You either continue or you stop. Most people stop. They interpret the boredom as a sign that something is wrong. They think, maybe this isn't for me. They think, maybe I'm not meant for this. But it's not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you've reached the real part of the process. the part where discipline matters more than motivation. And if you leave at that point, you reset everything. You go back to the beginning, you start over, again and again, and years pass without real progress. Meanwhile, the disciplined person stays. They don't rely on how they feel. They don't wait for inspiration. They don't need excitement to move forward. They understand something that most people ignore. Results are not created by intensity. They are created by consistency. It doesn't matter how hard you go for a few days. It matters how long you can keep going when it stops being fun. And that's where the real difference is built. Discipline is not about doing something perfectly. It's about doing it repeatedly, even when it's messy, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're tired. It's showing up on the days when you don't want to, because those are the days that actually shape you. Anyone can act when they feel good. Very few people act when they feel nothing. And that's why discipline creates separation. It separates those who talk from those who do. It separates those who start from those who finish. It separates those who dream from those who build. You don't need to be the most talented person in the room. You don't need to have the best starting point. But you do need one thing: the ability to continue when others stop. Because talent without discipline fades. Potential without discipline disappears. But discipline, even without talent, builds something real over time. It compounds. Every repetition adds something. Every day you show up, you gain a little more strength, a little more clarity, a little more control. And at first, it's invisible. You don't notice it. No one else notices it. It feels like nothing is happening, but something is happening. You are becoming someone who can endure. And that changes everything. Because once you build that ability, you stop depending on external factors. You stop needing perfect conditions. You stop needing motivation. You become stable, consistent, reliable. And that's when progress becomes inevitable. The irony is this: the thing that feels the worst in the short term, discipline, is the thing that gives you the most in the long term. And the thing that feels the best in the short term, comfort, is the thing that costs you the most later. You can choose your discomfort. You can choose the pain of discipline now or the pain of regret later. There is no escaping discomfort. There is only choosing when you face it. And most people delay it. They avoid it today, tomorrow, next week. And by the time they realize what they've lost, it's much harder to recover. They look back and wonder why nothing changed. But deep down, they know. They didn't stay. They didn't endure the boring part. They didn't push through the repetition. They didn't give the process enough time. And that's why they stayed average. If you want to be different, you have to accept something most people reject. The path is supposed to be boring. It's supposed to feel repetitive. It's supposed to test your patience, because that's what filters people out. That's what removes those who are not serious. That's what reveals who is willing to continue and who is not. And if you can pass that test, if you can stay when it's no longer exciting, if you can act when there is no reward, if you can keep going when everything in you wants to stop, then you will build something that most people never will. Not because you were more talented, but because you were more disciplined. So stop waiting for it to feel good. Stop expecting it to be easy. Stop looking for motivation to carry you. It won't. Discipline is quiet. Discipline is repetitive. Discipline is uncomfortable. But discipline works. And in the end, that's all that matters. You already know what you need to do. So why aren't you doing it? That's the question no one wants to answer honestly. Not because it's complicated. Not because the answer is hidden, but because the truth is uncomfortable. You are not stuck because you don't know the path. You are stuck because you refuse to walk it. Every single day, you wake up with a clear idea, at least a rough one, of what matters. You know the task you've been avoiding. You know the work that would move your life forward. You know the conversation you need to have, the habit you need to build, the decision you've been delaying. And yet, you don't do it. Instead, you delay. You scroll. You distract yourself. You tell yourself, I'll do it later. But later turns into tomorrow. Tomorrow turns into next week. And slowly, almost invisibly, your future begins to disappear. This is procrastination, and it is not harmless. It is not just taking a break. It is not just waiting for the right moment. It is the silent process of destroying your own potential, one delay at a time. The most dangerous part is this: Procrastination feels good in the moment. When you avoid something difficult, your mind rewards you. It gives you relief. It gives you comfort. It gives you a temporary escape from pressure. And your brain learns from that. It starts associating avoidance with safety, with ease, with pleasure. So the next time something difficult appears, you avoid it again and again and again, until avoiding becomes your default. But every time you delay something important, you are making a trade that most people don't even realize they're making. You are trading your future for comfort right now, and the price is always higher than you think. Why do you procrastinate? It's not because you're lazy. It's deeper than that. You procrastinate because you are afraid. Afraid of difficulty, afraid of failure, afraid of proving to yourself that you're not as capable as you hoped. So instead of facing that fear directly, you escape it. You postpone it. You create distance between you and the discomfort. But here's the truth. The fear doesn't disappear. It grows. The longer you avoid something, the heavier it becomes. The more you delay, the more pressure builds in your mind. The task becomes bigger, harder, more overwhelming. Not because it actually changed, but because your perception of it did. And eventually, it feels so heavy that you don't even try anymore. That's how procrastination kills your future. Not in one dramatic moment, but slowly, quietly, through repeated avoidance. You don't wake up one day and realize everything is gone. You wake up and realize you never moved. And the worst part? You always knew what to do. That's what makes it painful. That's what creates regret. Because deep down, you cannot lie to yourself forever. You know the difference between not knowing and not acting. You know when you're capable and choosing not to try. And over time, that awareness becomes a weight, a quiet voice in the back of your mind that keeps reminding you, you could have done more. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes brutally clear. It doesn't comfort you. It doesn't excuse you. It gives you a simple principle. Do the hard thing first, not later, not when you feel ready. Now, because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes. Not in reality, but in your mind. And your mind is where the real battle happens. The Stoics understood something that most people ignore. Discomfort is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Discomfort is temporary. Avoidance is permanent. When you choose to do what is difficult, you experience resistance. Yes, but that resistance fades. You adapt. You grow stronger. You build confidence, not from success, but from action. But when you choose to avoid, you strengthen the wrong habit. You train your mind to run away. And each time you do it, it becomes easier to repeat. That's why the solution is simple, but not easy. Reverse the pattern. Instead of avoiding discomfort, move toward it. Instead of delaying the hard task, start with it. Instead of protecting your feelings, challenge them. Because once you act, something changes immediately. The fear loses its power. The task becomes smaller. The resistance begins to break. And most importantly, you prove something to yourself. You prove that you are not controlled by your emotions, that you can act even when you don't feel like it, that you are capable of moving forward regardless of fear. And that is where real confidence comes from. Not from thinking, not from planning, but from doing. The problem is most people never reach that point. They stay trapped in thought. They analyze, they plan, they wait, but they don't act. And without action, nothing changes. They keep searching for motivation, but motivation is unreliable. It appears when things are easy, it disappears when things are hard. If you depend on motivation, you will only act when it's convenient. And convenience never leads to growth. Discipline does. And discipline means this. You do what needs to be done, regardless of how you feel, especially when you don't feel like it. That's why the rule is simple. Do the hardest thing first. Wake up and face it. Don't negotiate with it. Don't delay it. Because once it's done, everything else becomes easier. Your mind clears. Your energy shifts. You gain momentum. But if you delay it, it stays with you all day, in the background, draining your focus, creating pressure. You carry it everywhere, and it affects everything you do. This is the hidden cost of procrastination. It doesn't just delay your progress. It poisons your present. It turns simple tasks into burdens. It turns time into stress. It turns potential into regret. And all of it starts with one decision. I'll do it later. But later is a lie. Later is where your goals go to die. So if you want to take control of your life, you have to break that cycle. You have to stop negotiating with your own weakness. You have to act before you feel ready, because you will never feel ready. That moment doesn't exist. Readiness is created through action, not before it. And once you understand that, everything changes. You stop waiting. You stop delaying. You start moving. Even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's imperfect, because you realize something most people never do. The discomfort you avoid today is the life you regret tomorrow. But the discomfort you face today is the life you build tomorrow. So choose wisely. Do the hard thing first. Accept the discomfort. Move forward anyway. Because your future is not destroyed by failure. It is destroyed by hesitation. Your life is not weak by accident. It becomes weak because your mind is weak. That's the truth most people avoid. Not because it's complicated, but because it removes every excuse. If your mind is undisciplined, your actions will be inconsistent. If your actions are inconsistent, your results will be unstable. And if your results are unstable, your life will never move forward. It always starts in the same place, your mind. Look at your daily habits, not your intentions. Look at what you actually do when no one is watching. That is where the truth is. You stay up late for no reason, scrolling, watching, consuming, not because you have to, but because it's easy. You tell yourself, just a few more minutes, but those minutes turn into hours. You lose sleep. You wake up tired. You start your day already behind. Then you repeat it again. You scroll endlessly, moving from one piece of content to another, feeding your mind with noise. Information without purpose. Stimulation without direction. And slowly, your attention gets weaker. Your focus disappears. Your ability to sit still and do something meaningful becomes harder and harder. And then there's the worst part. You avoid your own goals. Not because you don't care, but because they demand effort. So instead of facing them, you escape. You distract yourself. You fill your time with things that feel productive, but aren't. And at the end of the day, you feel it. That quiet frustration, that awareness that you did nothing that actually mattered. This is how self-destruction looks in real life. Not dramatic, not obvious, but consistent. And consistency is what makes it dangerous. Because every small action you repeat is shaping your mind, and your mind is shaping your life. If you repeatedly choose distraction, your mind becomes scattered. If you repeatedly choose comfort, your mind becomes weak. If you repeatedly avoid effort, your mind becomes fragile. And once your mind becomes fragile, everything becomes harder. Simple tasks feel overwhelming. Small challenges feel exhausting. Progress feels impossible. Not because the world is against you, but because you cannot control yourself. This is where Stoic philosophy cuts through everything. It doesn't tell you to control the world. It tells you to control yourself. Because the world is unpredictable. People are unpredictable. Circumstances change. But your actions, those are yours. Your decisions, those are yours. Your discipline, that is entirely within your control. And yet most people ignore this. They spend their energy trying to control things they cannot. Other people, outcomes, external situations, while neglecting the one thing they can control, their own behavior. They want better results, but they don't control their habits. They want a better life, but they don't control their time. They want to feel strong, but they don't control their impulses. And then they wonder why nothing changes. But it's simple. A weak mind creates a weak life. Not because you are incapable, but because you are undirected. A weak mind seeks comfort over growth. It avoids difficulty. It chases distractions. And over time, that pattern becomes your identity. You become someone who starts but doesn't finish. Someone who plans but doesn't act. Someone who wants more but does nothing to earn it. And the longer this continues, the harder it becomes to break. Because habits don't just shape your actions, they shape your belief about yourself. If you constantly break your own promises, I'll wake up early, I'll work today, I'll stay focused, you begin to lose trust in yourself. And once that trust is gone, everything becomes fragile. You hesitate, you doubt, you delay, not because you lack ability, but because you no longer believe in your own discipline. This is why controlling your mind is everything. Because once you regain control, everything else starts to align. When you decide to sleep with intention, your energy improves. When you limit distractions, your focus returns. When you face your goals directly, your confidence grows, not instantly, but steadily. And that's what matters. The Stoic mindset is simple, but brutal. Control yourself and you control your life. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to change your direction. It doesn't matter how chaotic the world is if your mind is stable. It doesn't matter how many distractions exist if you refuse to engage with them. It doesn't matter how difficult your path is if you keep moving forward. Because strength is not about external conditions, it is about internal control. Can you focus when your mind wants to wander? Can you act when your body wants to rest? Can you continue when your emotions tell you to stop? That is strength. And that is what most people avoid building. They chase comfort, thinking it will make life easier. But comfort weakens them. It removes resistance. It removes challenge. And without challenge, there is no growth. You don't become stronger by avoiding difficulty. You become stronger by facing it repeatedly. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you strengthen your mind. Every time you act despite resistance, you build control. Every time you follow through on your word, you rebuild trust in yourself. And slowly, something changes. You become sharper, more focused, more stable. Not because life got easier, but because you got stronger. That's the difference. A strong mind doesn't need perfect conditions. It creates progress regardless of conditions. A weak mind waits. It reacts. It depends on external factors. So ask yourself honestly, are you in control of your mind, or is your mind controlling you? Because if you cannot control when you sleep, what you consume, how you spend your time, and whether you act on your goals, then you are not in control of your life. And that is the real problem. Not luck, not opportunity, not talent. Control. If you want to change your life, don't start by changing everything around you. Start by changing how you operate. Go to sleep when you said you would. Put the phone down when it distracts you. Do the work when it's uncomfortable. Not once, not when it feels good, but consistently. Because control is not built in one decision. It is built in repetition. And the more you repeat it, the stronger you become. Until one day, the things that once controlled you no longer have power over you. That's when your life changes. Not because the world changed, but because you finally did. And that is the core of everything. Control yourself. And you begin to control your future. The difference between winners and losers is not talent. It's not intelligence. It's not even opportunity. It's what they do when they don't feel like doing anything at all. That's where everything separates. Because anyone can act when they feel motivated. Anyone can push forward when they're excited, when the energy is high, when everything feels aligned. But that's not real strength. That's temporary emotion. And temporary emotion cannot build a permanent result. The real difference appears in silence, in the moments when there is no motivation, no excitement, no pressure from the outside. Just you and a choice. Do you act or do you wait? The losing mindset waits. It waits for the perfect mood. It waits for the right time. It waits for clarity, for confidence, for some external signal that says now is the moment. But that moment never comes. Because waiting becomes a habit. And the more you wait, the more comfortable it feels to delay. You start telling yourself stories. I'll start tomorrow. I need more time. I'm not ready yet. And those stories protect you from discomfort, but they also trap you in the same place. At the same time, the losing mindset looks outward for explanations. It blames circumstances, it blames the environment, it blames other people. If I had better conditions, I would succeed. If I had more support, I would be further ahead. If things were different, I would be different. But they're not. And instead of adapting, the losing mindset stays still. It focuses on what it cannot control and ignores what it can. It spends energy analyzing problems instead of solving them. It talks about change without creating it. And slowly, over time, that pattern becomes identity. Someone who waits, someone who reacts, someone who never quite moves forward. Now look at the opposite. The winning mindset does not wait, it acts. Not because it feels like it, not because it's easy, but because it understands something most people don't. Action creates momentum. Waiting destroys it. Winners don't rely on feelings. They don't need motivation to begin. They don't ask themselves, do I feel ready? They ask what needs to be done. And then they do it, even when it's uncomfortable, even when they're tired, even when they doubt themselves, because they know that feelings are unreliable. If you only act when you feel good, you will only move forward occasionally, and occasional effort produces inconsistent results. But consistent action, regardless of how you feel, produces real progress. That's why winners build systems. They don't depend on willpower alone. They don't wake up every day and hope they'll feel motivated. They remove that uncertainty entirely by creating structure. A time to wake up, a time to work, a time to train, a time to rest. Not random, not optional, decided in advance. And once it's decided, there is no negotiation. This is what most people misunderstand about discipline. They think it's about forcing yourself to do things constantly. But true discipline is not constant struggle, it is reduced decision-making. You don't ask, should I do this today? You already decided, so you act. This removes friction, it removes hesitation, it removes the internal debate that drains your energy. And over time, it creates something powerful, consistency. And consistency is what builds everything. Skill, confidence, results, not intensity, not bursts of effort, consistency. That's why someone who does a small amount of work every day will outperform someone who works hard once in a while. Because progress compounds. Each action builds on the last. Each day strengthens the foundation. The losing mindset never reaches that point because it resets constantly. It starts strong, then stops. Starts again, then stops again. And every time it stops, it loses momentum. It loses progress. It goes back to the beginning. Years pass like this. Effort without direction, energy without consistency, and nothing changes. Meanwhile, the winning mindset keeps moving. Not perfectly, not flawlessly, but consistently. It doesn't need to be the best every day. It just needs to show up. And that's enough, because over time, showing up beats everything else. You don't need to win every day. You just need to not quit. And that's where most people fail. Not in ability, but in endurance. They give up too early. They expect fast results. They expect quick progress. And when it doesn't happen, they stop. But winners expect the opposite. They expect it to be slow. They expect it to be difficult. They expect resistance. So when it comes, they're not surprised. They continue. And that's why they win. Not because they had an advantage, but because they stayed. If you strip everything down, the difference becomes simple. The loser asks, why is this happening to me? The winner asks, what can I do about it? The loser waits for a better situation. The winner creates one. The loser depends on emotion. The winner depends on structure. The loser avoids discomfort. The winner moves toward it. And over time, those small differences create completely different lives. One stays stuck. One moves forward. Not instantly, but inevitably. So if you want to change where you are, don't look for a new opportunity. Don't wait for motivation. Don't hope for a different situation. Change how you act. Act when you don't feel like it. Act when it's inconvenient. Act when it's uncomfortable. And most importantly, keep acting. Because success is not built in moments of intensity. It is built in moments of consistency. And consistency comes from one thing, a system you follow, whether you feel like it or not. Discipline is freedom. It sounds wrong, doesn't it? Everything in you wants to reject that idea because discipline feels restrictive. It feels like pressure, like rules, like forcing yourself to do things you don't enjoy. And freedom feels like the opposite. Freedom feels like doing whatever you want, whenever you want, without limits. But that definition of freedom is exactly what keeps most people trapped. Because if you look closely, the people who claim they are free are often the ones who are controlled the most. Controlled by their moods, controlled by their habits, controlled by their impulses. They wake up when they feel like it. They work when they feel like it. They stop when they feel tired. And they call that freedom, but it's not. That's dependency, because if your actions are controlled by how you feel, then you are not in control. Your emotions are. And emotions are unstable. They change constantly. They rise and fall. They push you forward one moment and pull you back the next. So if your life is built on emotion, your life will always be unstable. This is where discipline changes everything. Discipline removes dependence on feelings. It creates structure. It creates direction. It creates consistency. And over time, that consistency builds something powerful, freedom. Not the illusion of freedom, but real freedom. Freedom to choose how you live. Freedom to decide your direction. Freedom to not be controlled by your own weakness. At first, discipline feels like limitation. You wake up early when you don't want to. You work when it's uncomfortable. You say no to distractions. It feels like you are restricting yourself. But what you're actually doing is building control. And control is the foundation of freedom. Because without control, you cannot choose anything. You don't choose your actions. You react to your feelings. You don't choose your direction. You drift based on circumstances. You don't choose your life. You accept whatever happens. That is not freedom. That is passive existence. Now look at what happens when you develop discipline. You wake up when you decide, not when your body demands it. You work when it's necessary, not when it feels easy. You stay focused, even when distractions are available. At first, it feels difficult, but over time, it becomes natural. And once it becomes natural, something shifts. You gain time. Because you stop wasting it, you stop scrolling endlessly. You stop delaying important tasks, you stop drifting through your day without direction. Every hour becomes intentional. And when your time becomes intentional, your life starts to change. Because time is the most valuable resource you have. Not money, not status, time. And most people lose it without realizing. They trade hours for comfort. They trade focus for distraction. They trade growth for ease. And in return, they get nothing. No progress, no control, no real freedom. But when you apply discipline, you protect your time. You use it, you invest it. And over time, that investment creates something else, financial freedom. Not instantly, but steadily. Because discipline leads to skill. Skill leads to value. Value leads to opportunity. And opportunity leads to income. But none of that happens without consistency. You cannot build anything valuable by acting occasionally. You cannot create income by being inconsistent. You cannot reach independence by depending on motivation. Discipline is what connects effort to results. It is what allows you to stay long enough in the process for the process to work. And once it works, your life expands. You have more options, more choices, more control. That's what financial freedom really is. Not just money, but the ability to choose. To choose how you spend your time. To choose what you work on. To choose the direction of your life. And all of that begins with discipline. Now look at the opposite. What happens when there is no discipline? You lose control. You wake up tired because you stayed up late. You waste time because you cannot focus. You avoid work because it feels difficult. And slowly your life becomes reactive. You don't lead your day. Your day leads you. You don't make decisions. Your emotions make them for you. If you feel good, you act. If you feel bad, you stop. And because of that, nothing is stable. Your progress is inconsistent. Your energy is inconsistent. Your results are inconsistent. And over time, that inconsistency limits everything. You have less time, less money, fewer options. Not because the world restricted you, but because you never built the discipline to expand your possibilities. This is the reality most people ignore. Without discipline, you don't become free. You become controlled. Controlled by distraction, controlled by comfort, controlled by short-term pleasure. And short-term pleasure always comes with long-term cost. You feel good now, but you pay later, with lost time, lost opportunities, lost potential. So the real question is not whether discipline is hard. Of course it is. The real question is, what kind of life do you want? A life where you feel free in the moment, but trapped in the long term? Or a life where you feel challenged in the moment, but free in the long term? Because you cannot have both. You cannot choose comfort every day and expect freedom later. Freedom is earned, and the price is discipline. It's the willingness to do what others avoid, to stay consistent when others stop, to control yourself when others give in. And when you do that long enough, something changes. You no longer feel forced. You feel in control. You no longer depend on motivation. You act automatically. You no longer chase freedom. You live it. Because true freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is having the power to do what matters, regardless of how you feel. And that power comes from discipline. So yes, it sounds backwards, but it's true. Discipline is not the opposite of freedom. It is the path to it. No one is coming to save you. Not tomorrow, not when things get easier, not when you finally feel ready. No one. And the sooner you accept that, the faster your life begins to change. Because as long as you believe someone or something is going to pull you forward, you will keep waiting. You will keep delaying. You will keep telling yourself that your moment hasn't arrived yet. But your moment is not coming. It is created. Right now. With what you choose to do next. This is the harsh truth most people spend their entire lives avoiding. They wait for a breakthrough, for a sign, for the perfect opportunity to appear and suddenly make everything clear. They imagine a future where everything aligns, where they have the energy, the clarity, the confidence, the motivation, and only then will they begin. But that future does not exist. There is no perfect time. There is no moment where everything feels right. There is only now, and your decision to act or not act. And if you keep waiting for something external to change before you take responsibility, you will remain exactly where you are. Because waiting feels safe. It protects you from failure. It protects you from discomfort. It protects you from facing your own limits. But it also protects you from growth. And over time, that safety becomes a prison. You don't notice it at first. You think you're just being patient. You think you're preparing, but slowly, that waiting becomes a habit. You get used to delaying. You get used to not acting. And one day you look back and realize nothing has changed. Not because you couldn't change it, but because you didn't. You were waiting. And while you were waiting, life kept moving. Opportunities came and went. Time passed. Your potential stayed unused. And now you're left with the same thought. I just need the right moment. But there is no right moment. There is only a decision. And that decision is uncomfortable because it removes every excuse. It forces you to admit that your progress, or your lack of it, is in your hands. Not in your circumstances. Not in your past. Not in your luck. In you. And that is where most people hesitate. Because taking responsibility means you can no longer blame anything else. It means you can no longer say, I'll start when things improve. It means you have to start now with what you have, even if it's not perfect, especially because it's not perfect. You also need to understand something else. There is no permanent motivation. Motivation is temporary. It comes in waves. It appears when things are exciting, when the idea is new, when the energy is high, but it disappears just as quickly. And when it's gone, you are left with a choice: stop or continue. Most people stop. They mistake the loss of motivation as a sign that something is wrong. They think, I don't feel it anymore, so they quit. They move on to something else, chasing that initial excitement again. And they repeat this cycle for years, starting, stopping, starting again, stopping again, never staying long enough to build anything real. Because they rely on motivation. But motivation is not designed to carry you through the entire process. Discipline is. Discipline does not care how you feel. It does not depend on excitement. It does not disappear when things get hard. It is a decision, repeated daily, a commitment to act regardless of emotion. And this is the final divide. You either build discipline or you stay where you are. There is no middle ground. You cannot rely on motivation and expect consistent results. You cannot wait for the perfect time and expect progress. You cannot avoid discomfort and expect growth. You either step forward or you remain still. And remaining still has a cost. It doesn't feel like it at first. In fact, it feels comfortable. You stay where you are. You avoid risk. You avoid effort. You avoid failure. But what you're really avoiding is change. And without change, nothing improves. Your situation stays the same. Your habits stay the same. Your results stay the same. And slowly over time, that sameness becomes your life. Not because you chose it consciously, but because you refuse to change it. That is the hidden danger, not failure, stagnation. Failure can be corrected. Mistakes can be fixed. But stagnation becomes permanent if you allow it. And the longer you stay in it, the harder it is to break out. Because comfort grows. You get used to where you are. You adapt to your limitations. You lower your expectations. Until one day, you stop trying completely. That's what happens when you avoid discipline. You don't just stay in place. You lose the ability to move. So understand this clearly. You are not waiting for your life to begin. Your life is already happening, right now. And every day you choose not to act is a day you will never get back. No one will give it back to you. No one will compensate you for it. It's gone. So the question is not, when will you start? The question is, how much time are you willing to lose before you do? Because the longer you delay, the more you lose. Not just time, but opportunity, momentum, confidence. Every day you act, you build something. Every day you don't, you lose something. And that difference compounds. It grows. Until one day, the gap between where you are and where you could have been becomes impossible to ignore. That's when regret appears. Not because you failed, but because you never truly tried. And regret is heavier than failure, because failure teaches, regret stays. So if you want to avoid that future, there is only one path: not waiting, not hoping, not wishing, acting now. Not perfectly, not completely, but consistently. Because that is the only way forward. And it comes down to a simple, brutal truth. You either choose discipline or you stay exactly where you are, forever. So let's end this the only way that matters, with the truth, stripped of comfort, stripped of excuses. You are not unlucky. You were never unlucky. You just weren't disciplined enough. And that changes everything. Because if luck was the problem, you would be powerless. You would be stuck, waiting for something outside of you to change. You would have no control over your direction, no influence over your outcome. You would be forced to accept whatever life gives you. But that's not your reality. Your reality is much harder and much more powerful. Your life looks the way it does right now because of what you repeatedly do every single day. Not because of what you want, not because of what you say, but because of what you actually do. And that means something important. If your actions change, your life will change. Not instantly, not dramatically overnight, but inevitably. That's the part people underestimate. They expect transformation to feel explosive. They expect a moment where everything shifts at once, where suddenly they become a different person. But real change doesn't work like that. It's quiet. It's slow. It's built in small decisions that no one notices. Waking up when you said you would. Doing the work when it's uncomfortable. Finishing what you started. Repeating it again the next day and the next and the next. There's no applause for that, no recognition, no immediate reward. And that's why most people never reach it. They want visible results without invisible effort. They want progress without patience. They want to feel different before they act different. But it doesn't work that way. You don't act because you feel ready. You act and then you become ready. That's the shift. And once you understand that, everything becomes clear. You stop waiting. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop saying, I'll start tomorrow. Because tomorrow is just another version of today if you don't change what you do. So the only question that matters is not what do you want? It's what are you willing to do starting now? Because wanting is easy. Everyone wants more. More success, more money, more respect. But very few people are willing to pay the price. The price is repetition. The price is discomfort. The price is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. That's where discipline lives, and that's where your life begins to change. So don't overcomplicate it. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need a complete strategy. You don't need to figure everything out. You need to start. Start with something small, but real. Wake up 1 hour earlier, not because it's comfortable, but because it gives you time. Time to think, time to work, time to build something that actually matters. Then do the hardest thing first. Not the easiest, not the most enjoyable, the hardest, the one you've been avoiding, the one that makes you uncomfortable just thinking about it. Because that is the task that will move your life forward. Everything else is secondary. And once you do it, something shifts. You gain control, you gain momentum, you prove to yourself that you can act even when you don't want to. And that proof is powerful. Because once you have it, you can build on it. You repeat the process, the next day, and the next. No excuses, no delays, just action. And over time, that repetition becomes identity. You stop being someone who tries. You become someone who does. And that's when everything changes. Not because the world suddenly rewards you, but because you are no longer the same person. You are sharper, more focused, more consistent. And consistency always wins. It beats talent, it beats luck, it beats potential. Because while others stop, you continue. And that gap grows, day by day, week by week, until one day the difference becomes undeniable. People will look at you and say you changed. They'll ask what happened. They'll think something external shifted. But you'll know the truth. Nothing external changed. You did. And it started with a simple decision to act instead of wait. So remember this clearly. Your life does not change when you want it to. It changes when you act. Not when you plan, not when you think, not when you hope, when you act. That is the turning point, and it is always available to you. Right now, not later, not tomorrow, now. So don't leave this moment the same way you came into it. Don't listen, feel motivated for a few minutes, and then go back to your old habits. That's the cycle that keeps you stuck. Break it. Do something immediately, even something small. Because action creates momentum, and momentum creates change. And once that change begins, it builds, slowly, quietly, but powerfully. Until one day, your life no longer resembles what it used to be. Not because you got lucky, but because you became disciplined. So start today. Wake up earlier. Do the hardest work first. Repeat it every day, no matter how you feel, no matter how slow it seems, no matter how long it takes, because it will work. If you don't stop, and in the end, you won't need to prove anything to anyone. You won't need to explain your progress. You won't need validation because your results will speak for themselves. So stay quiet, stay focused, stay consistent, and become someone they can't ignore. In silence, become dangerous.